Sister's planner asked why I wasn't invited because I owned the venue and canceled her date. The question hung in the air over the phone, so full of innocent confusion it almost made me laugh. The planner, a woman with a crisp, professional voice, had no idea she had just stumbled into the middle of a family war that had been simmering for 20 years. My name is Sarah, and the sister in question is Chloe, my younger, prettier, and universally adored sibling. My sister's wedding, the venue I built, and I wasn't invited. They used me for my business, not my presence. Subscribe and like to see how I turned my family's betrayal into my ultimate victory. I was sitting in my office at the Whitestone, the venue I had poured my life savings and 3 years of relentless work into. From my desk, I could see the rose garden I had planted myself, each bush a testament to a weekend I didn't take off. This place wasn't just a business to me. It was the physical proof that I, the quiet, overlooked daughter, could build something beautiful and successful all on my own. The planner's call had come an hour earlier. She'd been confirming final details for the wedding of Chloe and Michael. She rattled off questions about floral arrangements and catering times, assuming I was the maid of honor, or at least a proud older sister helping out. The silence on my end of the line must have been deafening. "I'm sorry," she'd said, her tone shifting from cheerful to cautious. "Is this a bad time?" I had managed to keep my voice steady. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I told her. "I haven't received an invitation." That's when she asked the question that broke me. "Oh, that's so strange. Your sister Chloe listed you as the venue contact. Why wouldn't you be invited?" Why indeed? Because to my family, I was useful, but not essential. I was the reliable one, the one who could provide a stunning high-end wedding venue for free, but not someone they actually wanted sharing their special day. Chloe getting my venue for her dream wedding was a given in their minds. My presence, however, was optional. It was a familiar sting, a deeper version of every birthday I was expected to help set up, but whose party felt like it was for everyone but me. After hanging up with the bewildered planner, I called Chloe. She answered on the second ring, her voice like honeyed poison. "Sarah, I was just about to call you. The planner needs the final head count." She didn't even try to hide it. She just assumed I'd play along, that I'd swallow the humiliation and hand over my beautiful venue for her perfect day. "Chloe, why wasn't I invited to your wedding?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she crafted the perfect excuse. "Oh my God, Sarah, don't be so dramatic. Of course you're invited. The invitations are they're a bit delayed. You know how it is. Things get so crazy." It was a lie, and we both knew it. A flimsy, pathetic lie that was more insulting than the truth. "So you booked my venue, put me down as the contact, and just forgot to invite me?" I pressed. Her voice hardened. "It's not your venue. It's the family's place to celebrate. You're being selfish. This is my day, and you're trying to make it all about you, as always." That was her go-to move. Twisting my legitimate pain into a character flaw. I had heard it my whole life. As I listened to her justifications, my father's words echoed in my mind. He always warned me, the deepest cuts don't come from enemies, but from those who share your blood. He had seen the dynamic between us clearer than anyone, but he was powerless against my mother's favoritism for Chloe. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud crack, but a quiet, firm click into place. I was done. I was done being the doormat. I was done building beautiful things just for my family to wipe their feet on them. "You're right, Chloe," I said softly. "It is your day, and you'll have to find somewhere else to have it." I hung up before she could respond. Then I pulled up the contract she had signed. She'd gotten a family discount, which meant she paid nothing, but the contract was still legally binding. And it had a cancellation clause. A very clear one. My hands were perfectly steady as I picked up the phone and dialed the planner back. "Hello?" I said, my voice calm and professional. "This is Sarah from the Whitestone. I'm calling about the wedding of Chloe and Michael. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. That date is no longer available." The silence on the other end was profound. I could picture the planner, pen frozen over her notepad, mouth slightly open. I don't understand," she stammered. Everything was confirmed. "I understand this is an inconvenience," I continued, But the cancellation is effective immediately due to a breach of our terms of agreement. The Whitestone will no longer be hosting this event. Before she could ask another question, my other line began to buzz insistently. It was Chloe. I ignored it. I finished my call with the planner, apologizing for the mix-up and officially freeing up the most sought-after Saturday of the spring wedding season. The moment I hung up, the phone buzzed again. And again. Finally, I answered. Her voice was a shriek, high and sharp. "What have you done?" she screamed, the sound distorted by her rage. I took a slow, deliberate breath, looking out at the roses I had planted. They were just beginning to bud. "I just made a business decision, Chloe," I said calmly. "This is just the beginning." I let her words hang in the air for a moment, the echo of her shriek still bouncing off the walls of my quiet office. "A business decision?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief and fury. "You're ruining my wedding, my entire life, and you call it a business decision?" Before I could answer, another voice joined the call. My mother, Margaret. Of course. Chloe had probably speed-dialed her the second I hung up the first time, weaving a tale of sisterly betrayal. "Sarah, what is this I hear?" Margaret's voice was deceptively calm, the kind she used when she was about to deliver a crushing blow disguised as motherly concern. "Chloe is beside herself. You canceled her wedding venue? What on earth are you thinking?" I leaned back in my leather chair, the one I'd bought with my first big profit check. "I'm thinking that if Chloe wanted to use my venue, she should have had the decency to invite me to her wedding," I said, keeping my tone even. A scoff came through the speaker. "Chloe. Oh, here we go again. Always the victim. I told you the invitation was just delayed." "Was it, Chloe?" I asked. "Or did you just assume I'd provide the champagne and the ballroom and then quietly disappear so I wouldn't be in your perfect pictures?" "That's a horrible thing to say," Margaret cut in, her voice rising. "Your sister would never do that. You're being overly sensitive. This is a family matter, not business. You can't just cancel on family." "That's the thing, Mom," I said, looking at the framed $1 bill on my wall. "For my entire life, I've been treated like the family workhorse. I'm the one you call when you need something fixed, something planned, or something paid for. But when it comes time to celebrate, I'm suddenly not family enough to be included. I'm just a resource. Well, this resource is closing its doors." The line went quiet for a second. I had never spoken to them like this before. I was always the one to back down, to apologize for feelings I had every right to have. Then Chloe started to cry. They weren't real tears. They were tactical sobs, the kind she'd perfected since she was 5 years old to get the last cookie. "You don't understand," she wailed. "All the other vendors and the caterer, the florist, they're all booked for that specific date and location. Their contracts are tied to the Whitestone. If I lose the venue, I lose all my deposits. It's thousands of dollars, Sarah. Everything will be ruined." There it was, the guilt trip. I felt a familiar pang in my chest, a flicker of the old Sarah who would have immediately caved. They knew exactly which buttons to push. The thought of someone losing thousands of dollars because of me was sickening. But then I remembered. I remembered the 16th birthday party they threw for Chloe, a massive affair at a country club, while my own 16th birthday had been a quiet dinner at home because money was tight. I remembered the college graduation gift they gave her, a brand new car, while I got a gift card to a bookstore. I remembered all the small and large ways they had shown me my place. I was the supporting character in the grand story of Chloe. "That sounds like a serious problem," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "But it's not my problem. The contract you signed, the one with the family discount of 100%, has a clause about mutual respect and good faith. Failing to invite the owner of the venue to the event is a pretty clear breach of good faith, wouldn't you say?" Margaret gasped. "You're quoting contracts at your own sister?" "Sarah, this has gone too far. You will reinstate this booking right now. Your father would be so disappointed in you." Mentioning my father was a low blow. He was the only one who ever saw me, truly saw me. But he was gone, and she was using his memory as a weapon. The anger that had been simmering inside me for years finally boiled over, but it came out as an icy calm. "Dad would be disappointed that you're still treating one daughter like a princess and the other like a servant," I retorted. "And no, I will not be reinstating the booking. In fact, I've already offered the date to another client. A very high-profile couple who are willing to pay triple my usual rate for a last-minute opening. It was a bluff, a complete lie. I hadn't called anyone. But the effect was instantaneous. "You what?" Chloe screeched. "You can't do that. That's my date, my wedding date." "It was," I corrected her. "Now it's just a Saturday in June. A very profitable Saturday, as it turns out. You and Michael will have to find another place. I hear the community hall is available." The silence that followed was thick with a new kind of energy. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was the dawning horror of someone who has never faced a consequence in her life. Chloe had always gotten her way. The universe, orchestrated by our mother, had always bent to her will. I had just shown her that I was no longer part of that universe. I was my own planet, with my own gravity. "You will regret this, Sarah," Margaret said, her voice low and menacing. "We are your family. You think you can build a life by turning your back on us? You'll be all alone." "I've been alone my whole life," I said softly. "The only difference is, now I'm not pretending I'm not." I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for a reply. My hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. For the first time, I hadn't just stood up for myself. I had built a fortress and dared them to try and breach it. My phone immediately started buzzing again. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. Then Michael's. Then Margaret's. I silenced it and placed it face down on my desk. I looked out at my rose garden, at the perfect, unopened buds. They were on my timeline now. And they were going to be beautiful. The silence in my office after I hung up was heavier than any shouting match. The buzzing from my phone had finally stopped, as if Chloe and Margaret had run out of energy, or perhaps were regrouping to plan their next assault. I half expected them to just show up at my gate, demanding entry. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the main lawn. It was perfect, a lush green carpet leading to the grand oak tree where couples said their vows. My oak tree, my lawn, my business. For years they had seen this place as an extension of the family's assets, like a summer house they could use at will. They never saw the 18-hour days, the loans I took out in my own name, the nights I spent crying over spreadsheets. They only saw the beautiful result. My father's words came back to me, as they often did in moments of sharp pain. The deepest cuts don't come from enemies, but from those who share your blood. He used to say it while watching Margaret praise Chloe for a drawing that was clearly traced, while I sat quietly with my prize-winning science project that went unmentioned. He saw the pattern long before I understood it. He saw that I was being forged into a tool, while Chloe was being polished into a jewel. A sudden cold clarity washed over me. My bluff to Chloe about a high-profile client wasn't just a lie to get her off the phone. It was a prophecy. It was the only way forward. Canceling their wedding was a defensive move, born of hurt. But replacing it with something bigger, better, and more public, that would be a strategic victory. It would send a message not just to them, but to everyone in our social circle who had ever overlooked me. It would be a statement written in headlines and Instagram posts. My hands were steady now. I scrolled through my contacts, past the names of vendors and suppliers, until I found the one I needed. Vincent. Vincent was less a wedding planner and more a miracle worker for the rich and famous. He was impossibly well-connected, discreet, and had a reputation for making the impossible happen. We had worked together once on a charity gala, and he had been impressed with the Whitestone, calling it an untapped gem. I took a deep breath and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice smooth and efficient. Vincent speaking. "Vincent, it's Sarah from the Whitestone," I said, my voice all business. "Sarah, a pleasure. To what do I owe this call? Don't tell me your magnificent oak tree has fallen," he said with a dry chuckle. "The oak is fine," I replied. "I'm calling because I've had a last-minute cancellation for what is arguably the most desirable Saturday of the season, June 5th. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. Vincent was a shark. He smelled opportunity in the water. "Cancelled?" he asked, a note of intrigue in his voice. "That's highly unusual for a venue of your caliber so close to the date. Everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," I said, choosing my words carefully. "The client breached their contract. It's a clean break. The date is completely free. I thought of you because I know you often deal with clients who require flexibility and discretion. Another pause. Longer this time. June 5th, he repeated slowly. I might just have a situation that could benefit from this. A very public couple. Their original venue in Napa had a fire. They're scrambling, and the press is having a field day. They need a miracle, and they need it to be quiet until it's done. My heart started beating faster. This was better than I could have imagined. A public couple? Think tech billionaire marrying a movie star, Vincent said. They want absolute privacy, a stunning backdrop, and an ironclad non-disclosure agreement from every single person involved. The Whitestone is perfect. It's exclusive, it's secure, and frankly, it's not on the usual celebrity circuit, which makes it even better. They could be ghosts. I can guarantee absolute privacy, I said immediately. I know you can, he said. But Sarah, for a booking like this on this short notice, the price would be substantial. We're talking a figure that would make most people's eyes water, and a bonus for you that would be life-changing. Send me the proposal, I said without hesitation. I wasn't thinking about the money, not really. I was thinking about the look on my mother's face when she read about it in the society pages. I was thinking about Chloe trying to explain to her friends why a movie star was getting married at the venue that was supposed to be hers. There's one more thing, Vincent added, his voice lowering slightly. This couple, the bride is a huge philanthropist. She'll want a portion of the venue fee to be donated to a charity of her choice. It's part of her brand, and it's non-negotiable. Of course, I said. That's not a problem at all. Good, Vincent replied, his professional tone returning. I'll have my assistant draft the preliminary offer and the NDA. You'll have it within the hour. Sarah, if we pull this off, the Whitestone won't be an untapped gem anymore. It will be the place to get married. That's the plan, Vincent, I said softly. That's been the plan all along. We hung up and I stared at my phone. An hour ago, I was a woman humiliated by her own family. Now I was on the verge of hosting the wedding of the year. Chloe wanted a fairy tale wedding. I was about to give one to a Hollywood queen, right in the ashes of my sister's canceled dreams. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. You think this is a game? You have no idea who you're dealing with. This is Michael. You will fix this. I looked at the message, a threat from a man I barely knew who was about to marry my sister. I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange sense of pity. He, like my mother and sister, still thought this was about a canceled party. They didn't understand. I wasn't just taking away their venue. I was taking back my life, and I was just getting started. I deleted Michael's text without a second thought. It was the kind of empty threat a man makes when he's used to getting his way and is suddenly faced with a door slammed in his face. He, like Chloe and my mother, operated on the assumption that I was weak, that I would crumble under the slightest pressure. They had no idea that years of being sidelined had given me a spine of steel. They just never bothered to look closely enough to see it. True to his word, Vincent's proposal arrived in my inbox exactly 45 minutes later. The subject line was simple. Private matter. I opened the attached file and my breath caught in my chest. The numbers on the page didn't seem real. The venue fee was more than I made in an entire year, a figure so large it was almost comical. And as promised, there was a substantial discretion bonus for me personally, contingent on the event remaining completely secret until the couple made their own announcement. I scrolled through the document. It was 20 pages long, an ironclad agreement filled with clauses about security sweeps, background checks for all staff, and a non-disclosure agreement so strict it felt like I was planning a military operation, not a wedding. There was a list of demands from the celebrity couple, handled by Vincent. They wanted the entire grounds closed to the public for a full week. They wanted to fly in their own chef from Paris to work with my caterers. They even specified the exact type of champagne they wanted, a rare vintage that probably cost more than my car. And then there was the charity clause. The bride wanted 20% of the massive venue fee donated to a foundation that built schools for girls in developing countries. It was a gesture so grand, so effortlessly generous, that it highlighted the petty selfishness of my own family's demands. Chloe wanted a free party. This woman was funding an entire school with a fraction of her wedding budget. I printed the contract. Holding the warm paper in my hands made it feel real. This wasn't just a victory over Chloe. It was a transformation. This single event would elevate the Whitestone from a successful local business to a nationally recognized luxury destination. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. My phone rang and I flinched, expecting it to be my mother again. But it was Michael. I decided to answer. I wanted to hear what he had to say now that his initial rage had likely cooled into a more calculated strategy. "Sarah," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I'm glad I reached you. Listen, I think we all said some things we didn't mean earlier. Things got heated." I stayed silent, letting him talk. "Chloe is devastated," he continued, laying the guilt on thick. "She's been dreaming of this wedding her whole life. At this venue, you know that. Look, you made your point. You're hurt, and we get it. So let's be adults. Name your price. What will it take to make this right? We'll pay for the venue. Just tell me the number and I'll write you a check." The casual arrogance of it was breathtaking. He thought my pain, my lifetime of being treated as less than, had a price tag. He thought he could solve this problem by throwing money at it, just like he solved every other problem in his privileged life. "It's not for sale, Michael," I said calmly. His friendly tone evaporated instantly. "Don't be stupid, Sarah. Everything is for sale. You're running a business, aren't you? Or is this just some little hobby your parents helped you with?" "I built this business with my own money and my own two hands," I said, my voice dangerously low. "And you and Chloe will not be getting married here. That date is no longer available. It's been booked." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. "You're lying." "Am I?" I said. "You'll see. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a contract to sign." "You listen to me," he snarled. "That venue was built on land that's been in Margaret's family for generations. You might have put up the building, but you don't own it the way you think you do. There are legal avenues we can explore. You want a war? We'll give you a war." He hung up. The threat was different this time. It wasn't just bluster. It was specific. They were going to try and take my business away from me by claiming I didn't have full rights to the land it was on. A cold dread washed over me. It was a lie. My father had made sure the land was legally and indisputably mine before he passed, but a lie could do a lot of damage in a courtroom. I immediately called my lawyer, Mark. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his late 40s who had handled the legal work for setting up my business. "Mark, it's Sarah," I said, the second he picked up. I quickly explained the situation, the canceled wedding, the threats, and Michael's claim about the land. Mark listened patiently. "He's blowing smoke, Sarah," he said when I finished. "The title is clean. Your father made sure of it. They have no legal claim whatsoever. It's a scare tactic." "I know, but they could still sue me, couldn't they? Drag my name and the business's name through the mud?" "They could," Mark admitted. "Frivolous lawsuits happen. It would be expensive for them and ultimately go nowhere, but the public relations damage could be the real goal. They want to bully you into giving them what they want." He paused. "My advice? Get ahead of it. Don't play defense. Sign that new contract and let's send their lawyer a very polite, very firm cease and desist letter. We'll make it clear that any attempt to slander your business will be met with a lawsuit of our own." I felt a wave of relief. "Thank you, Mark. I'll sign the contract right now." We hung up and I picked up my pen, a beautiful fountain pen my father had given me. I signed my name on the dotted line of Vincent's contract. It was done. A moment later, a notification popped up on my laptop. It was a Google alert I had set for the Whitestone. My heart sank. A new review had just been posted. It was 1 star. "Owner is unstable and unprofessional," it read, posted under a fake name. "Canceled my dream wedding 2 months before the date for personal reasons. Do not trust this venue with your special day. She will ruin your life and laugh while doing it." Then another one popped up, and another. They were all the same. 1-star reviews filled with lies. The war wasn't coming. It had already started. I stared at my laptop screen, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. The reviews were a coordinated attack, a digital blitzkrieg designed to tear down everything I had built. Unhinged owner, read one. A beautiful place run by a vindictive woman, said another. Each one was a little knife, twisting in the wound of my family's betrayal. My beautiful venue, the Whitestone, was being painted as a house of horrors, and I was its monster. My hand trembled as I reached for the phone to call Mark again. My voice was thin, barely a whisper. They're destroying my reputation online. Fake reviews, dozens of them, all posted in the last hour. I could hear him typing on his end. I see them, he said, his voice as calm as ever. It was the calm of a surgeon looking at a wound he'd seen 1,000 times. It's a classic smear campaign, Sarah. Anonymous accounts, vague but damaging language. They're trying to create a perception of risk for potential clients. What can we do? I begged. Can we sue them? Make them stop? We can send takedown notices to the review platforms, but that's a slow process, Mark explained patiently. And for every one that gets taken down, they can create 2 more. Legally, proving libel from anonymous sources is a nightmare. It's designed to be. They want to bleed you dry in legal fees and public opinion. His words were practical, but they offered no comfort. I was fighting ghosts. As soon as I hung up with Mark, my phone buzzed again. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen in months. Mother. I let it ring 4 times before my guilt got the better of me. I answered. Sarah. Margaret's voice was ice. There was no greeting, no, how are you? Just the cold, hard edge of her disappointment. I have just gotten off the phone with Michael's mother. Do you have any idea the humiliation you have caused this family? The humiliation I've caused? I shot back, my own anger rising. I wasn't even invited to my own sister's wedding, Mom. They threatened me. They're trying to ruin my business. Oh, stop being so dramatic, she scoffed. You were always like this, making everything about you. Chloe is heartbroken. She thinks you hate her. You canceled her wedding out of spite, and now you've forced them to defend themselves. Defend themselves? By posting lies all over the internet? I could feel the familiar sting of tears, the ones I always had to fight back when I spoke to her. They are protecting their future, Margaret said, her voice unwavering. You have a lovely little business, dear, but family is forever. You should have just hosted the wedding and smiled. It's what normal people do. She didn't wait for a reply. She just hung up. I sank into my chair, the silence of my office feeling heavy and suffocating. My mother's words echoed in my head. A lovely little business. As if it were a hobby, a lemonade stand I'd built in the front yard. She had never once said she was proud of me. Not once. A ping from my laptop broke the silence. It was an email. The subject line read, Cancellation of venue tour. It was from a prospective client, a bride named Jessica I had spoken to just last week. She had been so excited about the rose garden. The email was short and polite. Hi, Sarah. I'm so sorry, but we've decided to go in another direction. After reading some recent feedback online, we don't feel the Whitestone is the right fit for us. That was it. The first real casualty of their war. It wasn't just my feelings anymore. It was my livelihood. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. They were going to win. They would sit back, watch my business crumble from a distance, and call it defending themselves. I walked over to the large window overlooking the grounds. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the gardens I had tended with my own hands. On my desk, my father's fountain pen lay next to Vincent's signed contract. I picked it up, the cool metal a familiar weight in my palm. I remembered him giving it to me on my college graduation day. He'd held my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. Sarah, he'd said, don't ever play their game. You win by building a better one they can't even enter. Their game was slander, lies, a public battle I couldn't win. So I wouldn't play. I needed to build a different game. Michael's threat came back to me. That venue was built on land that's been in Margaret's family for generations. He'd said it to scare me, to make me feel like my claim was weak. But what if he'd accidentally given me a clue? He was trying to use my mother's family history against me. It was time I learned that history for myself. My mother never spoke of her family. I knew she had a brother, but his name was forbidden in our house. I only knew he existed from a single faded photograph I'd found in an old box, showing a young Margaret with a teenage boy who had the same defiant eyes as me. I walked back to my desk, my purpose clear. The online reviews were just noise. The real war wouldn't be fought on websites. It would be fought in the past. Michael and Chloe wanted to use my mother's family as a weapon. They had no idea I was about to do the same thing. I pulled out my phone and searched for a name I hadn't typed in over a decade. The name of my uncle, Harold. He was the one person who would know all of Margaret's secrets, and I was going to find him. Finding Harold was like trying to find a ghost. The internet, which held every embarrassing photo of Chloe from the last decade, had almost nothing on him. There was a high school yearbook photo from 40 years ago and a single public record of a property tax payment in a town I'd never heard of. Rust Creek, Wyoming. It was a 3-day drive from my meticulously manicured world. I booked a flight for the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I put a closed for maintenance sign on the gate of the Whitestone, packed a small bag, and left before the sun was up. The flight was turbulent, and the rental car at the tiny regional airport smelled like stale cigarettes. As I drove, the landscape changed. The lush greenery of my home state gave way to vast, empty plains under an enormous sky. It was humbling and a little frightening. This was a world away from floral arrangements and wedding cakes. This felt real, raw, and unforgiving. Rust Creek wasn't so much a town as a suggestion of one. A single main street with a dusty diner, a gas station, and a hardware store. Harold's address led me down a dirt road to a small, weathered house with a workshop next to it. Old pieces of metal and farm equipment were scattered across the yard like metal skeletons. It looked nothing like the world my mother Margaret inhabited, with her country club luncheons and perfectly coordinated outfits. I parked the car, a cloud of dust settling around it. A man emerged from the workshop, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. He was older, with graying hair and deep lines around his eyes, but I recognized him instantly from the photograph. He had the same defiant eyes. My eyes. He watched me get out of the car, his expression unreadable, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Can I help you?" His voice was rough, like gravel. I suddenly felt foolish, like a child who had run away from home and didn't know what to do next. "Are you Harold?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. He squinted at me, his gaze sharp and intelligent. He looked me up and down, from my city clothes to my rental car. A long moment passed. "Depends who's asking," he finally said. "My name is Sarah," I said. "Margaret is my mother." The name hung in the air between us. His face hardened, the faint flicker of curiosity extinguished. "Then you're on the wrong property," he said, turning to go back into his workshop. "Wait," I called out, desperation creeping into my voice. "Please, I need your help." He stopped but didn't turn around. I learned a long time ago not to get involved in anything to do with my sister. It's a lesson that's kept me sane. "She's trying to destroy me," I said, the words tumbling out. "Her and my sister Chloe, they're trying to ruin my business, the venue. It's on the land." Michael said it was family land. At the mention of the land, Harold slowly turned back to face me. There was a new glint in his eye, something dark and ancient. "Family land," he repeated, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. He let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "She told you that, did she? Of course she did." He walked closer, stopping a few feet from me. He smelled of motor oil and sawdust. "What do you know about that land, girl?" "Nothing," I admitted. "That's why I'm here. My father always said, he said you win by building a better game. They're playing a dirty one and I don't know the rules. I thought maybe you did." Harold studied my face, searching for something. Maybe he was looking for traces of my mother, or maybe my father. "Your father was a decent man," he said quietly. "Too good for her." He paused, his gaze drifting over my shoulder towards the distant mountains. "Margaret doesn't play games, Sarah. She burns things to the ground and calls the ashes progress. If you're standing in her way, she won't stop until you're gone." I know, I whispered. I'm seeing that now. He nodded, a grim understanding passing between us. So you came all the way out here looking for a weapon. Something to fight back with. I came here looking for the truth, I corrected him. Harold gave another one of those humorless smiles. With my family, girl, that's the same thing. He looked at his workshop, then back at me. You want my help? You want to know about that land? Fine. But it's not a story I can just tell you over a cup of coffee. It's a story you have to earn. How? I asked, ready for anything. He pointed a calloused finger toward a rusted, forgotten-looking tractor near the workshop. See that engine block? It's seized. Been sitting there for 10 years. You get it running by the end of the week, and I'll tell you everything you want to know about our mother, our father, and the family land your mother is so proud of. My own sister used my venue for her wedding, but didn't invite me. What would you do in my place? Comment your thoughts and share if you understand this family betrayal. I stared at the piece of machinery. I knew how to balance a budget, negotiate with vendors, and grow prize-winning roses. I knew nothing about engines. I don't know how to do that. Figure it out, Harold said, his voice flat. That's the first rule of the game you want to play. You don't ask for the manual, you write it yourself. He turned and walked back into his workshop, the door closing behind him with a definitive click, leaving me alone in the dusty yard with an impossible task, and the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. The first day was a masterclass in failure. I spent hours just staring at the silent, monolithic block of rust and steel. It was an alien landscape of wires, tubes, and greasy components I couldn't name. I found a toolbox in the workshop, the tools heavy and foreign in my hands. I tried turning a wrench on a bolt, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled harder, my knuckles scraping against a sharp edge of metal. I yelped, pulling my hand back to see a smear of blood. I felt a ridiculous urge to cry. I was the owner of a successful events venue. I negotiated six-figure contracts, but I was being defeated by a single rusty bolt. That evening, I limped back to the town's only motel, smelling of rust and failure. I bought a greasy burger from the diner and a copy of Diesel Engines for Beginners from the hardware store. I ate alone in my sterile room and read until the words blurred together. Carburetor, spark plugs, piston rings. It was a new language, and I was completely illiterate. For a moment, I thought about my mother, Margaret, and Chloe. They were probably at a charity gala, sipping champagne, laughing about the negative reviews they'd paid for. They would find this whole situation hilarious. Me, in the middle of nowhere, covered in grease, trying to fix a tractor. The thought fueled a cold fire in my gut. The second day was different. I woke up before dawn, my mind clearer. My father's words echoed in my head. You win by building a better game. This wasn't just about fixing an engine. This was a test. Harold wasn't just being difficult. He was showing me the rules of his world. In his world, you couldn't pay someone to solve your problems. You couldn't charm your way to a solution. You had to understand the machine from the inside out. You had to get your hands dirty. I went back to the yard with a new plan. I stopped trying to force things. Instead, I just looked. I followed the wires with my fingers, tracing their paths. I used my phone to look up diagrams of this specific tractor model, a Farmall Model H from the 1940s. The signal was weak and the pages loaded at a snail's pace, but it was enough. I spent the entire morning just cleaning parts, wiping away decades of grime to see what was underneath. I discovered a cracked fuel line, brittle as an old leaf. I found a mouse nest tucked inside the air filter. Small discoveries, but they were mine. They were progress. Late in the afternoon, Harold came out of his workshop. He didn't say anything to me. He just walked over to a water spigot, filled a tin cup, and set it on a crate near where I was working. Then he went back inside. It wasn't an offer of help, but it wasn't hostility either. It was a neutral gesture, a quiet acknowledgement that I was still there, still trying. It felt like a small victory. On the third day, I tackled the seized piston. According to my book, it was the heart of the problem. I needed a special kind of oil to penetrate the rust. I walked the 2 miles back into town to the hardware store. The owner was an old man named Frank with kind eyes. He sold me a can of penetrating oil and gave me a piece of advice. Patience, he said, and a little bit of heat. Sometimes you gotta warm up the metal to make it let go. I returned and applied the oil, letting it soak in. Then, using a small propane torch I found in the workshop, I carefully heated the area around the piston as Frank had suggested. I felt a flicker of fear as the flame licked the old metal, but I kept my hand steady. I remembered Chloe's sneering voice at that last family dinner, calling my business a hobby. I remembered Michael's smug threat. This heat was nothing compared to the fire they had lit under me. I picked up a heavy hammer and a block of wood. I placed the wood over the piston and gave it a solid, measured tap. Nothing. Again. Still, nothing. I felt that familiar despair creeping back in. Maybe this was impossible. Maybe I was just a girl who planned parties, pretending to be something else. "You're hitting it like you're asking it a question," a gravelly voice said from behind me. I jumped, startled. Harold was standing there, arms crossed, watching me. "You gotta hit it like you know the answer," he said. He didn't move to help. He just stood there, his gaze intense. I looked at the engine, then back at him. I took a deep breath, picturing my mother's condescending smile. I raised the hammer again, but this time I put all of my anger, my frustration, and my desperation into the swing. I wasn't asking anymore. I was demanding. The hammer connected with the wood block with a loud, definitive crack. And then, I heard it. A tiny, almost imperceptible groan from deep within the engine. A scraping sound of metal against metal. It had moved. Only a millimeter, but it had moved. I stared at it, my heart pounding. I looked up at Harold. His expression hadn't changed, but there was a flicker of something in his defiant eyes. Respect. "Do it again," he said. And for the first time, his voice didn't sound like a challenge. It sounded like an instruction. I did it again. And again. For what felt like hours, I worked in a rhythm of heat, oil, and force. I tapped and hammered, not with blind rage, but with a focused intensity I didn't know I possessed. Each solid thud was a punctuation mark in a sentence I was writing to myself. I will not be broken. Slowly, painfully, the piston began to move more freely until, with a final groaning shudder, it slid all the way down its cylinder. I almost collapsed with relief, my arms trembling from the effort. I had won the first real fight. The rest of the fourth day was a blur of discovery. With the main problems solved, I could see the smaller ones. It was like my father said, "You win by building a better game." My mother's game was about tearing things down. This was about building something up from its own ashes. I disassembled the carburetor on a clean rag, following a blurry diagram on my phone. Its tiny jets were clogged with a thick, varnish-like substance. I meticulously cleaned each part with a wire brush and solvent, the fumes making my head spin. Harold never spoke to me, but I felt his presence. Sometimes I'd glance up and see him watching from the doorway of his workshop before he'd disappear back into the shadows. He was testing my endurance, my commitment. That night at the motel, every muscle in my body ached. I soaked in a lukewarm bath, the water turning a grayish color from the grease I couldn't scrub off my skin. I looked at my hands. They were almost unrecognizable. My nails, usually perfectly manicured, were broken and stained. My knuckles were raw, and a new network of small cuts crisscrossed my palms. These weren't the hands of Sarah, the event planner. These were the hands of someone who could take an engine apart and put it back together. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of pride that had nothing to do with a successful party or a glowing client review. It was a deeper, more solid feeling. The fifth and final day arrived with a gray, overcast sky. It was now or never. I had a new fuel line I'd bought from Frank, a set of clean spark plugs, and a rebuilt carburetor. I spent the morning putting everything back together. My movements were surer now, more confident. I knew what each part did. I understood how the fuel and air and spark had to dance together in a perfect, violent ballet to create life. It was a system, a set of rules, and for the first time, I felt like I understood them. By noon, it was done. The tractor sat there, looking slightly less like a forgotten relic and more like a machine that remembered its purpose. I connected the battery cables. My heart was a drum against my ribs. This was it. All the work, the pain, the doubt. It all came down to this moment. I climbed onto the cold iron seat, my greasy jeans sticking to the metal. I took a deep breath, picturing Margaret and Chloe at one of their luncheons, laughing. I pictured Michael's threatening smirk. They thought they had already won. I pulled the choke and turned the ignition key. The engine gave a pathetic, whining groan and then fell silent. My stomach dropped. I tried again. Nothing but the same sad noise. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of my hard-won confidence. It was impossible. I had failed. I had spent a week of my life, covered myself in filth, for nothing. I was just a girl who planned parties after all. I slumped over the steering wheel, the sting of tears blurring my vision. You flooded it. Harold's voice was so close it made me jump. He was standing right beside the tractor, holding a wrench. He didn't look angry or smug. He just looked matter of fact. You were too eager, he said, pointing with the wrench at the carburetor. Gave it too much gas, not enough air. It's drowning. Let it sit for a minute. Let it breathe. I just stared at him, unable to speak. He hadn't helped. Not really. But he hadn't let me fail completely either. He had let me get to the very edge on my own, and then offered a single, crucial piece of information. We stood in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the wind whistling through the pines. The gray clouds overhead seemed to press down on us. Try it now, he said quietly, and go easy on the choke. My hands were shaking as I reached for the key again. I did as he said, barely pulling the choke out. I turned the key. There was a cough, a single promising explosion from within the metal block, then another. It sputtered, catching and dying, catching and dying. I gently feathered the throttle, feeding it just enough gas. The sputtering became a rough, uneven rhythm. The whole machine began to shake, vibrating through the seat and up my spine. Black smoke puffed from the exhaust pipe, and then it caught. The rhythm smoothed out into a loud, throbbing, deafening roar. The tractor was alive. I sat there, clutching the wheel, my entire body trembling with the engine's power. I felt a wild, hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. I had done it. I had actually done it. I looked at Harold. He was watching the engine, a strange expression on his face. He reached out and laid a hand on the vibrating hood, as if greeting an old friend. Then he looked at me, his eyes meeting mine over the noise. He didn't smile, but the hard lines around his mouth seemed to soften just a fraction. "All right, girl," he shouted over the engine's roar. "Shut it down." I turned the key, and the glorious noise died, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The smell of exhaust and hot metal hung in the air. Harold gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Come on inside," he said, his voice back to its usual gravelly tone. "I'll put the coffee on. You earned your story." He turned and walked toward the house, not looking back, confident that I would follow. I followed him. The path to his small, weathered house was worn into the dirt, a testament to countless trips back and forth. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and something else. Old books, maybe. It was the complete opposite of my venue, the Whitestone, which was all clean lines, fresh flowers, and calculated elegance. This place was lived in, honest, and cluttered with the tools and remnants of a long, practical life. There were no decorations, just shelves overflowing with worn paperbacks and stacks of what looked like farmers' almanacs. Harold didn't speak. He moved with a slow, deliberate economy, getting 2 mismatched ceramic mugs from a cupboard, filling a dented metal pot with water, and spooning dark, coarse grounds into a percolator. I sat at his small kitchen table, my hands still faintly trembling from the tractor's vibrations. I felt out of place in my tailored blazer and clean jeans, a city bird who had stumbled into a bear's den. The percolator began to bubble and hiss on the stove, a comforting, domestic sound. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling a loose pane in the window. It felt like we were in a small, safe capsule, sealed off from the rest of the world, especially the world containing my sister, Chloe, and her perfect wedding plans. Finally, Harold poured the coffee. It was black, thick, and smelled strong enough to strip paint. He pushed a mug across the table to me. He didn't offer cream or sugar. I wrapped my cold hands around the warm ceramic. He sat down opposite me, his own large calloused hands dwarfing his mug. He took a sip, his eyes never leaving my face. They were pale blue, weathered by years of sun and wind, and they seemed to see more than I was comfortable with. "All right," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You got the machine running. Now talk." The bluntness of it, the simple transaction, unlocked something in me. He wasn't asking for gossip. He was collecting payment. I had earned my story. "I have a sister," I began, the words feeling rusty in my throat. "Her name is Chloe. She's getting married." I told him everything. I told him about a childhood spent in Chloe's shadow. A shadow cast not by malice, but by her effortless sunshine. Chloe was the one who laughed easily, who made friends without trying, who charmed every adult she met. I was the quiet one, the serious one, the one who always had her nose in a book. My parents, I explained, weren't cruel. They just followed the light, and the light was always shining on Chloe. I told him about my 10th birthday party, when I had asked for a chemistry set. My parents got me a doll, the same one Chloe had, because all girls love dolls. Chloe had accidentally broken her own doll a week earlier, so she was thrilled. Everyone celebrated how happy she was. No one noticed I never took mine out of the box. I told him about winning the state science fair in high school. I came home with a giant blue ribbon and a small scholarship offer. But I found my mother on the phone, crying, because Chloe's boyfriend of 3 weeks had just broken up with her. My victory was never mentioned. Chloe's heartbreak became the family's crisis for the next month. "It was never one big thing," I said, staring into my black coffee. "It was 1,000 little things, 1,000 paper cuts, until you don't even feel like a whole person anymore. You just feel like the other one." Harold was silent, just listening. He hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked much. He just absorbed the words. "So I built something," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I built the Whitestone. I used every penny I had, every bit of energy. I wanted to build something so beautiful, so successful, so undeniably real, that they couldn't ignore it, that they would have to see me." I let out a short, bitter laugh. I imagined them being so proud. I imagined Chloe asking to have her wedding there, telling all her friends that her brilliant sister owned the most beautiful venue in the state. I paused, taking a shaky breath. Her wedding planner called me last week. By mistake. She was looking for a caterer recommendation. She thought I was the maid of honor. That's how I found out Chloe was getting married. Not from my sister, not from my parents, from a stranger, and they weren't having it at my venue. They booked a country club an hour away. The story hung in the small kitchen, ugly and raw. Harold took another slow sip of his coffee. He set the mug down with a soft click. "So you canceled the date they wanted at your place?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said, my chin lifting. "I told the planner it was booked for a corporate retreat. A lie, but a satisfying one." He looked at me for a long moment. I expected judgment, or maybe a gruff nod of approval. I got neither. "That tractor," he said, his voice even. "You were fighting it. You were trying to force it to turn over, trying to make it do what you wanted right now. But it wasn't about force. It was about giving it the right things in the right order. Air, fuel, spark. You were drowning it with what you thought it needed." I frowned, not understanding. "What does that have to do with anything?" He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "You built that whole fancy place for them, didn't you? You poured all that fuel into it, expecting a certain result. You wanted their approval, their pride, their attention. You were trying to force their engine to turn over." He grunted. "And now you're mad because they didn't even try to turn the key." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. He was right. Every rose bush, every polished floor, every 5-star review I chased, it was all fuel. Fuel for an engine that wasn't mine. I hadn't built the Whitestone for me. I had built it for them, and they hadn't even noticed. The realization left me feeling hollowed out, emptier than before. The small victory of canceling the wedding date suddenly felt petty and small. It hadn't fixed anything. It was just me flooding the engine again. I just sat there, the coffee in my mug turning cold. Harold's words echoed in the sudden silence of the kitchen. He was right. He was so brutally, painfully right. Every decision I had made for the past 3 years, from the type of marble for the foyer to the specific shade of cream for the linens, had been a desperate attempt to get a reaction from an engine that wasn't even mine. I had built a palace to impress ghosts. Harold stood up, his chair scraping softly against the old linoleum floor. He took his mug to the sink and rinsed it out, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't say anything else for a long moment, and I just watched him, feeling like a child who had been justly scolded. "Stop trying to fix their engine," he said, turning from the sink with his back still mostly to me. "It's not yours to fix, and it's probably broken for good anyway." He dried his hands on a rag hanging from a drawer handle. "Go build your own." With that, he walked out the back door, letting it click shut behind him. I was alone again, but the emptiness felt different now. It wasn't just sadness. It was a vast, echoing void where my purpose used to be. The petty satisfaction of lying to Chloe's wedding planner had evaporated, leaving behind the bitter taste of my own foolishness. What had I accomplished? Nothing. I had kicked a machine that wasn't plugged in. Later that afternoon, I was walking through the grand ballroom of the Whitestone. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. This room was my masterpiece. It had cost a fortune and a year of my life to get the acoustics just right, to find the perfect chandeliers. I had imagined Chloe walking down an aisle right here, her dress sweeping across these polished oak floors, and my parents, Vincent and Margaret, looking at me with a pride that finally eclipsed their adoration for her. It was a fantasy, and seeing it now for what it was made my stomach ache. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a vendor or a client. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Margaret, my mother. I let it ring 4 times before my thumb finally swiped to answer. "Hi, Mom." "Sarah, darling, I was starting to think you weren't going to pick up." Her voice was bright, but with that familiar underlying tension. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. "How are you? Is the hotel business keeping you busy?" She always called it a hotel, never a venue. Another one of those 1,000 paper cuts. "It's a venue, Mom, and yes, I'm busy. What's up?" "Well, I'm calling about the wedding, of course. It's all so exciting, but honestly, so much to do. Poor Chloe is just overwhelmed, you know how she gets." I didn't say anything. I just listened to her paint a picture of my delicate sister, bravely navigating the horrors of choosing between salmon and chicken for her 100 closest friends. "Anyway," Margaret continued, her voice shifting into a more purposeful gear. "We were going through some of Grandma's old things, and Chloe had the most wonderful idea. You know Grandma's pearl necklace? The one she wore at her own wedding?" I knew it. It was in my jewelry box upstairs. My grandmother had given it to me on my 16th birthday. She had looked me in the eyes and said, "For your wedding day, Sarah, you are the strong one, the one who will build a life as solid as these pearls." "Yes, I know it," I said, my voice flat. "Wonderful. Well, Chloe would be just honored to wear it, as her something old. Isn't that sweet? She's just so sentimental. It would really mean the world to her, Sarah. You never wear it anyway, and it would just be perfect with her dress." The audacity of it hit me like a physical shock. They hadn't invited me to the wedding. They hadn't even told me about it. But they felt perfectly entitled to ask for my most precious possession for the star of the show. It wasn't a request. It was an expectation. They saw me not as a person, but as a resource for Chloe. "I don't know, Mom," I managed to say, my throat tight. The lightness in her voice vanished instantly. "What do you mean you don't know? Sarah, for heaven's sake, don't be difficult. It's for your sister. It's one day. What is there to even think about?" "It was a gift," I said quietly. "From Grandma to me. And now you can share that gift with your sister. It's about family," she snapped, her patience gone. "Honestly, sometimes I don't understand you. Chloe is trying to include you, and you're being selfish. Just bring it over this weekend. Michael's parents are coming for dinner on Saturday, and Chloe wants to show it to his mother." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the middle of my empty ballroom, the phone still pressed to my ear. The hollow feeling was gone. In its place, a cold, Hard anger was crystallizing in my chest. It was a rage so pure and so clear it felt like a revelation. They hadn't just ignored my engine. They were trying to strip it for parts to fix their favorite model. I looked around the magnificent room I had built. My palace. My fortress. Harold was wrong about one thing. I didn't need to go build my own engine. I was already standing inside it. I had been so focused on using it to beg for their attention that I never realized its true potential. It wasn't a plea. It was a weapon. My fingers flew across my phone's screen, finding the number for the wedding planner. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hello, this is Jessica," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "Jessica? Hi, it's Sarah again," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I'm calling about my sister Chloe's wedding. I believe there's been a change of plans." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear Jessica's perfectly organized mind shuffling through files and schedules. "A change of plans? But Ms. Chloe's contract with the country club is already signed. I was just calling you for that catering list she mentioned." "I know," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "But I've just had a look at my own schedule. It seems I made a mistake. The date Chloe wanted, May 18th, it's not booked for a corporate retreat. It's actually available." The silence on the line was even longer this time. "Oh," Jessica finally said, sounding confused. "Well, that's good to know, but as I said, they've already booked elsewhere. I'm not sure what—" "That's not the change of plans I'm talking about," I cut in, walking over to the grand windows overlooking the perfectly manicured gardens. "The change is that I'd like to offer my venue, the Whitestone, to my sister for her wedding. Free of charge, my gift to her." I could hear a faint gasp. "Free of charge? Sarah, that's an incredibly generous offer. Your venue is magnificent. The rental fee alone is—" "I'm aware of the fee," I said. "It's a wedding gift. From a loving sister." The words tasted like acid, but I kept my tone sweet. "There is one small condition, however." "Of course, anything," Jessica said, her professionalism clicking back into place. She was probably already calculating how much this would elevate the wedding, how good it would look on her portfolio. "The offer is only for May 18th, I said. "That specific date. It's very sentimental to our family. If she wants the venue for free, it has to be on that day." "I see," Jessica said slowly. "So she would have to cancel her contract with the country club and move everything to your venue for that specific date." "Exactly," I confirmed. "You'll find that the Whitestone can accommodate a much larger guest list, and our list of preferred vendors is second to none. I'm sure you can make it work. Think of it as a family reunion." I gave her a few more details and hung up, a strange sense of calm settling over me. I had just thrown a beautiful, glittering bomb into the middle of their perfect plans. Now, all I had to do was wait for the explosion. It took less than an hour. My phone rang, and the screen glowed with Margaret's name. I let it ring 3 times, took a deep breath, and answered. "What is the meaning of this?" She didn't even say hello. Her voice was a low hiss, a venomous thing I knew all too well. "Hello to you too, Mom," I said, keeping my voice light. "Don't you play games with me, Sarah. Jessica just called Chloe hysterical. You offered the venue for free? On the one day you told us was booked? Are you trying to ruin your sister's wedding?" "On the contrary," I said, picking a single imaginary piece of lint from my sleeve. "I'm trying to save it. I heard they booked some stuffy country club. Chloe deserves the best. She deserves the Whitestone. My gift." "A gift?" she screeched. "You call this a gift? Forcing her to change everything, to lose her deposit at the club, just to satisfy your petty little ego? This is because we didn't tell you, isn't it? You're punishing her." "Punishing her? Why would I do that?" I asked, my voice dripping with false innocence. "I'm her sister. I love her. I built this place dreaming of her wedding day. I just want to give her that dream." "You are an ungrateful, selfish child," Margaret yelled, her voice cracking. "After everything we've done for you," I laughed. A real, actual laugh. It bubbled up from that cold, hard place in my chest. "Everything you've done for me? You mean ignore me? You mean forget I exist unless you need something? You mean calling me to demand Grandma's pearls for the daughter you actually care about, without so much as an invitation to the wedding? There was a stunned silence. I had never, not once in my 28 years, spoken to her like this. That necklace is a family heirloom, she finally stammered, her voice weaker now. It was a gift, to me, I said, the words sharp and clear. And the white stone was my dream, for me. You were right about one thing, though. I was being selfish. Selfish to think that building all this would ever be enough to earn your attention. I was flooding an engine that was never going to start. The metaphor, Harold's words, felt right on my tongue. It felt powerful. I don't know what you're talking about with engines, she snapped, trying to regain control. You will call Jessica back and you will apologize. You will offer Chloe any date she wants. No, I said simply. The offer stands, May 18th, free of charge, my beautiful, perfect gift. Or she can have her wedding at the country club. And you can explain to Michael's very wealthy parents why her own sister's world-class venue wasn't good enough. The choice is hers. I paused, letting the weight of the ultimatum sink in. Oh, and Mom? About the pearls. Tell Chloe I'll have a gift for her on her wedding day. Something old. Something she truly deserves. I ended the call before she could respond. I stood there in the ballroom, the setting sun casting long shadows across the floor. The rage had cooled, replaced by a crystalline certainty. I wasn't just fixing my own engine anymore. I was building a whole new machine. And it was going to be spectacular. The 2 days that followed were a masterclass in silent fury. I received no calls, no texts, just a thick, suffocating silence that told me everything I needed to know. They were scrambling, calling every other venue in a 100-mile radius, trying to find a way out of the corner I had painted them into. On the third day, an email arrived. It was from Chloe. The subject line was simply, wedding. The body of the message was even colder. We will accept your generous offer for May 18th. Please coordinate with Jessica for the final details. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a strange, hollow calm. The decision had been made. The machine was in motion. The day of the wedding was perfect, painfully, ironically perfect. The sun was a warm gold, the sky a cloudless blue. My roses were in full bloom, their scent hanging in the air. A string quartet played softly on the main lawn as guests arrived. From my office window, I watched them all. Michael's family, wealthy and polished, mingling with my mother's friends, who were all buzzing with the drama they could only guess at. Margaret was a whirlwind of fake smiles, her hand gripping a glass of champagne so tightly her knuckles were white. And then there was Chloe. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, her dress a cloud of white tulle, her hair perfectly styled. But I could see the tightness around her eyes, the slight forced curve of her lips. She was an actress playing the part of the happy bride. I stayed in the background, a ghost at my own masterpiece, ensuring everything ran smoothly. My staff, loyal and professional, treated me with quiet respect. They didn't know the story, but they knew something was happening. I moved through the event like a shadow, my presence a constant, unspoken question. Just before the ceremony was set to begin, as guests took their seats in the grand ballroom, the lights dimmed for a slideshow, a surprise from the bride's sister. My mother shot me a venomous look, but she couldn't object without causing a scene. The slideshow started innocently enough. Pictures of baby Chloe, Chloe at her prom, Chloe and Michael on vacation. Sentimental music played. The guests smiled and murmured. Then the tone shifted. A picture of me and my grandmother, her arm around my shoulder, appeared on the screen. Then another of us baking in her kitchen. The music changed to a simple, unadorned piano piece. And then, it wasn't a picture. It was a video. My grandmother, sitting in her favorite armchair, looking frail, but with a familiar fire in her eyes. It was from her 80th birthday, 2 years before she passed. She looked directly at the camera, which I had been holding. "I want to say something about these pearls," she said, her voice clear and strong as she touched the necklace she wore, the very same one Chloe was wearing at that moment. "They were my mother's, and they will be Sarah's. Some people think heirlooms are for the prettiest daughter, the one who marries rich. But heirlooms are for the daughter with the strongest heart, the one who shows up, the one who remembers. Chloe will have a beautiful life, I know it. But Sarah has my heart. These are for you, my sweet girl. Never let anyone tell you they belong to someone else. The video ended. The screen went black. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the grand ballroom was the quiet hum of the projector. A collective gasp rippled through the room. I saw Michael's parents turn to look at each other, their faces etched with confusion and dawning anger. I saw Michael stare at Chloe, not with adoration, but with a sharp, questioning gaze I had never seen him use before. Margaret had gone pale, her mouth slightly open in a silent scream. Chloe stood frozen, her fairy tale facade shattering into a million pieces. She found me a few minutes later by the entrance to the rose garden. The ceremony had been delayed indefinitely. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. Her beautiful face was twisted into an ugly mask. "It was my gift to you," I said calmly, my voice even. "Something old, the truth." "You ruined everything," she shrieked, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. "No, you did," I replied, reaching into the pocket of my simple black dress. "You and Mom. You built this entire wedding on a lie. You built my entire life on the idea that I was second best." I opened my hand. Inside, nestled on a small velvet cloth, was another string of pearls, identical to the ones she wore, but these glowed with a soft, authentic luster. "Grandma gave me the real ones a week after she filmed that. She knew Mom would try to take them. The ones you're wearing are a very good replica she had made." I held them out to her. "Here. You can have the real ones too. They don't mean anything to me anymore. They're just things." She stared at the pearls in my hand, then at my face, her mind struggling to process the layers of deception. "You see, Chloe," I said softly, my voice filled with a final, liberating pity. "My whole life I was trying to start an engine that you and Mom had already flooded. I kept pouring in my love, my effort, my dreams. It was never going to work." I closed her hand over the real pearls. "I'm done. I'm not fixing that engine anymore. I built a new one." I gestured to the beautiful venue around us, to the setting sun glinting off the windows, to the roses I had planted myself. "This one," I said. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with 2 necklaces and a ruined wedding. I didn't look back. I walked into my garden, the scent of the roses enveloping me. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a quiet, clean, and beautiful peace. The engine was running perfectly. From being overlooked to owning the venue, I exposed their lies and walked away with my real pearls and peace. The white stone is now fully booked, and I finally own my story. What did you think of my final move? Subscribe for more stories of triumph.